Good morning, everyone. This is a school project for our class, and we're going to talk about the statements and consequences of the Treaty of Versailles.
Treaty of Versailles was the peace document signed at the end of World War One by the Allied and associated powers and by Germany in the Hall of Mirrors in the Palace of Versailles, France, on June 28, 1919. It took force on January 10, 1920.
The Treaty of Versailles held Germany responsibly for starting the war and imposed harsh penalties in terms of loss of territory, massive reparations payments, and demilitarization.
When the German government asked the United States President Woodrow Wilson to arrange a general armistice in October of 1918, he declared that it accepted the 14 points he had formulated as the basis for a just peace.
But who was Woodrow Wilson really? Thomas Woodrow Wilson was born December 28 in 1866, and he died at the age of 68 in 1924. He was an American politician and academic who served as the 28th President of the United States from 1913 to 1921. Wilson's 14 points were: number 1, diplomacy should be public with no secret treaties. Number 2, all nations should enjoy free navigation of the seas. Number 3, free trade should exist among all nations, putting an end to economic barriers between countries. Number 4, all countries should reduce arms in the name of public safety. Number 5, fair and impartial ruling in colonial claims. Number 6, restore Russian territories and freedom. Number 7, Belgium should be restored to independence. Number 8, all Alsace-Lorraine should be returned to France, and France should be fully liberated. Number 9, Italy's frontiers should be drawn along clearly recognizable lines of nationality. Number 10, people living in Austria-Hungary should be granted self-determination. Number 11, the Balkan states should also be guaranteed self-determination and independence. Number 12, Turks and those under Turkish rule should be granted self-determination. Number 13, an independent Poland should be created. Number 14, a general association of nations must be formed to mediate international disputes.
On October 3rd and 4th of the year 1918, the Prince Maximilian of Baden, the German Imperial Chancellor, sent a note via Switzerland to President Wilson, requesting an immediate armistice and the opening of peace negotiations on the basis of the 14 points. Germans would later argue a betrayal when faced by the harsher terms of the armistice and the Treaty of Versailles.
The treaty was drafted during the Paris Peace Conference in the spring of 1919, which was dominated by the national leaders known as the Big Four. But who were the Big Four? The Big Four were David Lloyd George of Britain, George Clemenceau of France, Woodrow Wilson of the United States, and Vittorio Orlando of Italy.
The first three in particular made important decisions. None of the defeated nations had any say in shaping the treaty, and even the associated Allied powers played only a minor role. The German delegates were presented with a fait accompli. They were shocked at the severity of the terms and protested the contradictions between the assurance made when the armistice was negotiated and the actual treaty. Accepting the war guilt clause and the reparation terms was especially odious to them.
The population and territory of Germany was reduced by about 10% by the treaty. In the west, Alsace-Lorraine were returned to France, and the Saarland was placed under the supervision of the League of Nations until 1935. In the north, three small areas were given to Belgium, and after a plebiscite in Schleswig, northern Schleswig was returned to Denmark. In the east, Poland was resurrected, giving most of formerly German West Prussia and Poznan, giving a corridor to the Baltic Sea, which separated East Prussia from the rest of Germany, and giving part of Upper Silesia after a plebiscite. And Danzig was declared a free city. All Germany's overseas colonies in China, in the Pacific, and in Africa were taken over by Britain, France, Japan, and other allied nations.
The War Guild Clause of the treaty deemed Germany the aggressor in the war and consequently made Germany responsible for making reparations to the Allied nations in payment for the losses of damage they had sustained in the war. It was impossible to compute the exact sum to be paid as reparations for the damage caused by the Germans, especially in France and Belgium. At the time, the treaty was being drafted, but a commission that assessed the losses incurred by the civilian population set an amount of 33 billion in the year of 1921. Although economists at the time declared that such a huge sum could never be collected without upsetting international finances, the Allies insisted that Germany be made to pay, and the treaty permitted them to take punitive actions if Germany fell behind in its payments.
The Big Four, especially Clemenceau, wanted to make sure that Germany would never again pose a military threat to the rest of Europe, and the treaty contained a number of stipulations to guarantee the same. The German army was restricted to 100,000 men. The general staff was eliminated. The manufacture of armored cars, tanks, submarines, airplanes, and poison gas was forbidden, and only a small number of specified factories could make weapons or munitions. All of Germany west of the Rhine and up to 30 miles, which is 15 kilometers east of it, was to be a demilitarized zone. The forced disarmament of Germany, it was hoped, would be accompanied by voluntary disarmament in other nations.
The treaty included the Covenant of the League of Nations, in which members guaranteed each other's independence and territorial integrity. Economic sanctions will be applied against any member who resorted to war. The League was to supervise mandated territories, the occupied Sarvasin and Danzig, and to formulate plans for reducing armaments. The treaty also established the Permanent Court of International Justice and the International Labour Organization.
The Treaty of Versailles was bitterly criticized by the Germans, who complained that it had been dictated to them, that it violated the spirit of the 14 points, and that it demanded intolerable sacrifices that would wreck their economy. In the years after it was ratified, the Treaty of Versailles was revised and altered mostly in Germany's favors. Numerous concessions were made to Germany before the rise of Adolf Hitler, and by 1938 only the territorial settlements articles remained.
Many historians claim that the combination of a harsh treaty and subsequent lax enforcement of its provision paved the way for the upsurge of German militarism in the 1930s. The huge German reparations and the War Guild clause fostered deep resentment of the settlement in Germany. And when Hitler remilitarized the Rhineland in 1936, which was a violation of the treaty, the Allies did nothing to stop him, thus encouraging future German aggression.
For our part, that's all. Thank you for your attention, and please, teacher Marcela, give us an A+.